My name is Ethan Cole. I work search and rescue in one of the largest national parks in the United States. Most people think my job is heroic. They imagine helicopters, grateful families, and happy endings. Most days, it's just paperwork, cold coffee, and long nights staring at maps. Lost hikers, twisted ankles, bad weather. That's what we tell the public. What we don't talk about are the places we're not allowed to search. Not because they're unstable, not because they're dangerous, but because every time someone steps inside those boundaries, something out there becomes aware of them. And sometimes it follows us back. Search and rescue isn't heroic most days. Most of the time, it's long shifts inside an aging rescue station buried deep in the woods. A low building with dark wooden walls that always smell like damp air and burned coffee. The radio in the center of the room is older than it should be. The paint is chipped. The volume knob sticks. When it crackles to life, it sounds more like metal scraping than a human voice. We don't rely on satellites or glowing screens out here. We use paper maps. Folded. Creased. Edges worn soft by years of hands that came before mine. Night shifts stretch the longest. There's no conversation unless someone forces it. Just wind pressing against the walls, the heater clicking on and off, and a clock that seems determined to count every second out loud. Mike usually works nights with me. Former military. Quiet. Always sits with his back to the wall. Sarah's voice comes through the radio from dispatch, calm and steady, the only thing that makes the hours feel connected to the rest of the world. And then there's Tom. Tom has been a ranger here for over 20 years. Long enough that the forest feels more familiar to him than town streets. He drinks his coffee black and weak, like he's afraid it might wake something up if it tastes too strong. People tell stories around the desk to pass the time. Stupid stories. Funny ones. Stories about tourists who wandered off trail or bears that learned how to open coolers. Tom never joins in when the stories drift too far into the backcountry. On my second week, while unfolding the map for another quiet shift, I noticed something wrong. There was a section of forest with no name. No trail numbers. No elevation marks. Just a thick black outline, drawn heavier than anything else on the map. In the center, written in red ink, were 3 words: "Do not enter." I stared at it longer than I should have. When I asked Tom about it, he didn't laugh. Didn't sigh. Didn't even look surprised. He folded the map carefully, slid it back across the table, and said, "If dispatch doesn't say the name over the radio, you don't ask about it." The first call came in at 2:14 a.m. Sarah's voice cut through the usual radio haze like she'd been waiting for the right second to speak. "Ethan, we've got a missing hiker. Male. Mid-30s. Solo. Last signal pinged near Black Ridge Access." Black Ridge. Tom never said that name out loud, but I'd seen it in tiny print on older maps, right up against the thick black outline. Close enough to make my stomach tighten. Mike was already pulling on his jacket. No questions. No jokes. Just that quiet, locked-in look he got when a situation turned real. Search and rescue training teaches you to focus on what you can measure. Weather. Terrain. Time since last contact. It doesn't teach you what to do when the forest feels like it's holding its breath. We rolled out in the truck with the heater struggling and the headlights cutting tunnels through the dark. The road into the park looked normal at first: pine silhouettes, reflective trail signs, a distant ridgeline under a sky full of cold stars. Then we hit the section where the trees grew closer together and the road narrowed like it was being pinched shut. Mike glanced at the GPS, then at the paper map on my lap. "Signal pings here," he said, tapping the edge of the restricted outline. I nodded like it was fine. like there wasn't a red warning on the map that said "Do not enter." We parked at the trailhead and stepped out into air that felt thin and metallic, like standing too close to an open freezer. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill your skin. It goes straight to your teeth. We did the basics. Protocol stuff. Check gear, headlamps, batteries, med kit, rope, emergency blankets. Mike clipped the radio to his vest. I did the same. "Dispatch, this is SAR 2, I said. "We're at Black Ridge Trailhead. Beginning grid search along the last known ping." Static. Then Sarah. "Copy. Be advised no other units available. Weather's stable for now. Keep comms open." Tom wasn't on the channel. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. We started down the trail. At first it felt like every other night search I'd ever done. The beam of my headlamp caught wet leaves, pale rocks, the occasional glitter of frost. Then we crossed the tree line. Not the physical line where trees begin. Something else. It was subtle. Like stepping from one room into another and realizing the temperature has changed. The air turned dead still. Too quiet. No birds. No insects. Not even the normal whisper of branches rubbing together. Just our footsteps, muffled, as if the forest itself was absorbing sound. Mike slowed without saying anything. I heard it in his breathing, the way it tightened, controlled. "Probably just the cold," I muttered, mostly for myself. "Everything gets quiet when it drops like this." Mike didn't answer. We called the missing hiker's name the way we're trained to.
"Jason! Search and rescue! If you can hear us, call out!"
Our voices didn't carry. They fell into the trees and died. I remember thinking that was odd. Sound should bounce. It should echo. Even a little. But out there, it was like the air refused to give anything back. We found the first sign 30 minutes in. A boot print, clean and sharp in a patch of thin snow. I knelt, shining my light across it. It was a men's hiking boot. Tread pattern consistent with the brand Sarah had described over the radio. I felt relief for half a second. Then I saw the direction. The toe pointed back toward the trailhead. The print wasn't leading deeper into the woods. It was leading out. Mike crouched beside me. His gloved finger traced the edge of the imprint. "That's wrong," he said, voice low. I scanned ahead, expecting to see a line of prints continuing. There were more. But they didn't make sense. A cluster of steps that looked like someone had paced in a small circle, then stopped. No drag marks. No stumble. No sign of a fall. Just a sudden end, like the person had been lifted straight up. I swallowed, forcing my brain to do what it always does, build a reasonable explanation. "Wind could have covered the rest," I said. "Or drifted snow." Mike shook his head once. "Not like this. We moved forward anyway, because that's what you do. You don't turn around just because something feels wrong. You turn around when you have proof." And at that point, I didn't have proof. Just a growing pressure behind my eyes, and the feeling that our headlamps were the only living things out there. Then the temperature dropped. Not gradually. Not like normal night air cooling. It dropped like a switch had been flipped. My breath turned into thick white clouds. The inside of my nose stung. My fingers went numb inside insulated gloves. Mike stopped dead. "Did you feel that?" "Yeah," I said, teeth tight. "Cold pocket. Terrain does weird stuff." But the ground wasn't changing. The elevation wasn't dropping. There was no creek. No open valley. Just trees. A wall of trees. And that cold didn't come from the air. It felt like it came from inside the forest, pushing outward. We pressed on, lights sweeping, scanning for anything fabric, a broken branch, a pack strap. That's when my radio whispered my name. Not through static. Clear. Close. "Ethan." I froze so hard it felt like my spine locked. Mike turned his head slowly, eyes cutting toward me. I lifted the radio off my vest like it had burned me. "Dispatch?" I said. "Sarah." Did you just call me? Only static answered. I tried again. Dispatch, confirm last transmission. Nothing. Mike leaned in, his voice barely above the quiet. You heard it too. I wanted to say no. Wanted to laugh and say it was a glitch. But the word had been perfect. Like someone standing right behind me. I stared into the trees, my headlamp beam catching nothing but trunks and darkness. It's interference, I said quickly. Old radios, cold air. Happens. Mike didn't look convinced. He looked like a man trying not to look over his shoulder. We kept moving. But I did it with a new rule in my head that I didn't want to admit I was making. Don't stop. Don't listen too hard. Don't give the forest a chance to talk back. We found more prints. More backward steps. Like someone had been walking away from something they couldn't see. And then we found the strap. A piece of backpack webbing, torn clean through, hanging from a branch about 7 feet off the ground. 7 feet. A grown man doesn't drop a strap that high. Mike shined his light up the tree. The bark was scraped. Not by claws. By something smooth and heavy, like a body had been pressed against it and dragged. I forced a laugh that sounded fake even to me. Bear, I said. Could have been a bear. Mike looked at the scrape line, then at the empty air around us. Bear would have left tracks, he said. Bear would have made noise. He was right. A bear crashing through brush is never silent. Out here the brush wasn't even moving. The forest stood perfectly still, like it was posing. My radio crackled again. For half a second, I thought it would be Sarah. Instead, it was me. My voice. Same tone. Same cadence. Ethan, turn around. My stomach dropped so fast I tasted bile. Mike grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. Don't, he hissed. Don't answer. I stared at him, wide-eyed. This is not dispatch, he said, and there was a strange certainty in his voice, like he'd been waiting for this moment. Then what is it? I whispered. Mike didn't reply. He didn't have to. Because the trees behind us made a sound. Not a branch snapping. Not an animal moving. A footstep. Soft. Deliberate. In perfect rhythm with ours. One step for every step we took. Keeping distance. Matching. Walking us. My head started to turn before my brain could stop it. Mike tightened his grip and pulled me forward. No. He said again. Keep your eyes ahead. I tried to breathe. Tried to focus on the simple things. My boots. The beam of my light. The fact that the missing hiker was still out there. That he needed us. That this was just stress, and cold, and imagination. But then the footstep changed. It moved closer. Not rushing. Just closing the gap like it already knew where we were going. Mike's voice went sharp, controlled. Ethan. We mark this point. We backtrack. Now, backtrack, I whispered. We're close. We have signs. Not signs, Mike said. Bait. The word hit me like a slap. Bait. As if the forest had laid out evidence like breadcrumbs. As if it wanted us to follow. My radio whispered again. This time it sounded like Sarah. Ethan, can you hear me? You're off grid. You're crossing into. It cut out. Then my voice returned, closer than before. So close, it said. And for the first time, I realized the silence wasn't empty. It was listening. I forced my hands to work, pulling out the survey tape, wrapping it around a branch. Bright orange, human. A mark that said we were here. And the moment I tied the knot, the temperature dropped again. The breath left my lungs in a sudden gasp. My headlamp flickered. Once. Twice. Then steadied. Mike's light did the same. We looked at each other. That was the closest thing we had to proof. Not a monster. Not a shape. Not a scream. Just the park itself reacting to us like an organism. Like a living thing that didn't want our lights in its dark. Interference, I whispered again. Like if I said it enough times, it would become true. Mike didn't argue. He just started leading us back the way we came. Fast but quiet, and behind us the footsteps followed. Perfectly. Patiently. as if whatever was out there wasn't hunting. It was learning. Tom finally told me the truth on my third night shift. It was just after midnight. The station was quiet in the way only old buildings get settled, tired, like it had already decided. Nothing good was coming before dawn. Mike had gone to check the vehicles. Sarah was off rotation. That left just me and Tom at the desk, the map spread between us like an open wound. "There aren't official rules for search and rescue," Tom said. His voice was low, flat. "But there are rules we follow if we want to come home." He reached into a drawer I'd never seen him open before and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. It wasn't laminated. It wasn't typed. It was old, stained. The edges were soft, like it had been handled too many times by hands that shook. "Those aren't policy," Tom said. "They're memory." I unfolded the paper. There were no titles, no explanations, just a list. Rule 1. Never call the missing person's name after sunset. Tom watched my face as I read it. "We're trained to shout names," I said. "It's standard procedure." Tom nodded. "During the day." He leaned back and stared at the ceiling like he was reading something written there instead. "About 8 years ago," he said, "we had a teenager go missing near the restricted zone. First night out, Rookie did everything by the book. Shouted the kid's name. Loud. Clear." Tom swallowed. "The forest answered." He didn't elaborate. I asked anyway. He shook his head. "It used the kid's voice, then his mother's, then one of ours. They found the rookie's radio the next morning. Still transmitting. Still calling the boy's name. They never found the rookie." "Names anchor things," Tom said. "Out there, you don't want attention. Rule 2: if you hear footsteps matching yours, do not turn around." I felt my stomach tighten. "Matching how?" I asked. "Same pace. Same rhythm," Tom said. "Not chasing, not following." He leaned forward. "Walking with you." Tom told me about a night search during a snowstorm. 3 rangers, single file. Visibility maybe 10 feet. The middleman turned around. Not because he heard something loud. Because the footsteps behind him were too perfect. Tom closed his eyes. "They found his body 2 miles away," he said. "Neck twisted the wrong direction. Like something tried to see through him. The other 2 never heard the extra step stop. They just faded." Rule 3: never follow thermal readings inside the restricted zone. This one was circled in red. I frowned. Thermals are how we find people in cold conditions. Tom snorted quietly. "They know that." He explained that inside the zone, thermal cameras light up constantly. Human-shaped heat signatures. Standing still. Waving. Every time a team followed one, they found nothing at the coordinates. But when they reviewed the footage later, the shapes were closer. Frame by frame. Getting warmer. "Heat isn't always body heat," Tom said. "Sometimes it's friction. Movement without form." Rule 4: if you see someone standing still between the trees, do not approach. I pictured it instantly. A silhouette. Too straight. Too patient. Tom nodded like he could see the image too. "They don't blink," he said. "And they don't sway. Wind can be screaming, and they'll stand like they're nailed to the ground." One ranger waved. The thing waved back. Same arm. Same angle. That ranger quit the next morning. Still won't say what he saw when he got close. Rule 5: if your radio broadcasts your own voice, turn it off immediately. This one had been underlined so hard the paper tore. Tom met my eyes. "They don't mimic perfectly at first," he said. "They practice." He told me about an incident where a dispatcher heard her own voice asking for help from a unit that had already signed off. She responded. Whatever answered learned how she spoke after that. By the end of the night, every transmission sounded like her. They shut the whole system down. The forest stayed loud anyway. I looked up from the paper. "You keep saying they," I said. "What are we talking about, Tom?" Tom hesitated. Then he said something that chilled me more than any monster description ever could. "We don't know," he said. "And the ones who got close enough to learn didn't come back to teach us." He tapped the paper. "All we know is behavior, patterns, boundaries." I scanned the rest of the list. Rule 6, never search alone after midnight. Rule 7, do not camp inside the black outline for any reason. Rule 8, if the forest goes silent, you leave immediately even if the missing person is in front of you. That last one stuck with me. "In front of you?" I asked. Tom's mouth tightened. "They can look right," he said. "Sound right. Cry right." He stood and folded the paper again, slower this time. "These rules weren't written all at once," he said. "They were added after mistakes. I thought of Mike, of the footsteps, of my voice on the radio." "Why are they there?" I asked. "Why that part of the park?" Tom picked up the map and traced the black outline with one finger. "This land was never empty," he said. "We just built trails through it and pretended that made it ours." I asked why the park stayed open, why the public never knew. Tom gave a tired smile. "Because most people never step far enough off the trail," he said, "and the ones who do." He didn't finish. The radio crackled. For a second, every muscle in my body locked. Then Sarah's voice came through, normal, grounded. "Ethan, be advised. We've got another missing hiker report pending review." Tom met my eyes. "Remember the rules," he said quietly. "They're not there to save the lost." I swallowed. "They're there to save us." As I refolded the paper and slid it back into the drawer, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me before. The rules weren't written to stop whatever lived out there. They were written to keep it interested, to keep it playing by boundaries it had already learned. And as the radio hummed softly on the desk, I couldn't shake the feeling that something beyond the walls of the station was listening. Not waiting to attack, waiting to see which rule we'd break next. Mike broke rule number 2. He turned around. It wasn't dramatic. No scream at first. No warning. Just a subtle shift in his posture, like he'd realized something behind us had finally gotten close enough to matter. I opened my mouth to shout his name. I stopped myself. Too late. Mike's flashlight swung wide, cutting through the trees behind us. For half a second I saw nothing. Then Mike screamed. Once sharp, raw, human. And then the forest copied it. Same pitch, same panic, only louder, closer. The sound came from everywhere at once, trees, ground, air itself vibrating like a speaker turned too high. It wasn't echo. It was repetition, practice. Mike dropped his radio. I heard it hit the ground and crack, still hissing with static as he staggered backward. Something moved behind him. Not fast, not slow, just wrong. The underbrush didn't shake. Branches didn't snap. Whatever it was didn't need to push the forest aside. It passed through it. Mike fell. I don't remember deciding to run. I just remember the world tilting as my legs moved before my thoughts caught up. We ran without direction, without radios, without looking back. The trail vanished almost immediately, swallowed by darkness and trees that all looked the same under shaking headlamps. Mike screamed again. This time it didn't sound like him. It sounded like he was choking on something that didn't belong in a human throat. Then the scream cut off. Too clean. No crash, no struggle, just absence. The forest went silent again. That was worse. I ran harder. Branches slapped my face. My lungs burned. My boots slipped on wet leaves and loose rock. I heard footsteps behind me. Not crashing. Not running. Walking. Calm. Measured. One step for every step I took. Matching my pace perfectly. I tried to speed up. The footsteps did too. I slowed. They slowed. Whatever followed me wasn't hunting. It was guiding. Herding. My radio flared to life at my hip. I hadn't realized I was still wearing it. "Ethan," my voice said calmly. "You're going the wrong way." I ripped the radio off and threw it as hard as I could into the trees. It kept talking after it hit the ground. "Ethan," it called. "Stop running." I didn't stop. I burst through a stand of trees and nearly went over the edge of a ravine. Cold air rushed up from below, sharp and wet. I skidded to a halt inches from the drop. The footsteps stopped behind me. Not because they couldn't come closer, because they didn't need to. I backed away from the edge, heart hammering so hard I thought it might tear itself out of my chest. "Mike," I whispered. My own voice answered. From the trees. "Help me." It sounded hurt. Weak. Perfect. I shook my head violently, squeezing my eyes shut. Rule 1. Rule 2. Rule 8. Don't call names. Don't turn around. If the forest goes silent, even if the missing person is in front of you, you leave. But there was nowhere to go. The ground around me felt wrong now. Spongy. Like it had been walked over too many times, by things that weren't heavy, but weren't light either. The cold deepened again, rolling in like a wave. I felt it in my bones. My headlamp flickered. Once. Twice, shapes moved at the edge of my vision, tall, thin suggestions of figures that vanished when I tried to focus on them. "Ethan," my voice said again. "You left me." I clamped my hands over my ears. The sound didn't stop. It didn't need to travel through air. It felt like it was coming from inside my skull. I stumbled away from the ravine, choosing a direction at random and pushing through brush that suddenly resisted me, branches tangling around my arms like fingers. The footsteps resumed. Closer now, not matching my pace anymore. Anticipating it. I broke into a clearing without realizing it, a patch of ground oddly smooth, free of debris. Like it had been swept clean. In the center stood something that made my breath catch. A figure. Human-shaped. Standing perfectly still. It faced away from me. It wore a jacket that looked like Mike's. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Another part, older, deeper, begged me to speak. The figure's head tilted slightly, not toward me, as if it was listening to something else. Its shoulders moved in a way that suggested breathing, but the rhythm was wrong. Too slow. Too even. The footsteps stopped. The forest waited. I took one step backward. The figure took one step forward. Same distance. Same timing. I felt tears burn my eyes. "This isn't real," I whispered. The figure's head turned. Not smoothly. It rotated in small, jerking increments, like something learning how necks work. I saw its face. Or what it had chosen to use. It was Mike's. But wrong. The skin looked stretched, like it didn't quite fit what was underneath. The eyes were open too wide, unblinking, reflecting my headlamp back at me in dull white circles. Its mouth opened, and my voice came out. "Come here." The footsteps rushed me then. Not from behind. From everywhere. I ran. I don't know how long I ran. Time dissolved into pain and breath, and the certainty that stopping meant disappearing. The forest blurred into streaks of dark and pale bark. My lungs screamed. My legs threatened to give out. Then, suddenly, light. Headlights. A vehicle. I burst out of the trees and collapsed onto a gravel road, coughing, sobbing, scraping my hands raw as I crawled toward the safety of human noise. A truck door slammed. Someone shouted my name, my real name, with the weight of urgency and fear that only another human can put into it. Hands grabbed me, lifted me, pulled me back. I screamed when they touched me, convinced it was another trick. "Easy, easy," someone said. "You're safe." I wasn't convinced until the forest reacted. The trees at the edge of the road leaned. Not physically. In some other way I couldn't explain. Like a crowd disappointed the show was over. Then the silence broke. Birds, insects, wind. Normal sounds rushed back in all at once, overwhelming. I lay on the ground, shaking, staring up at the sky as the shapes between the trees faded back into nothing. They found Mike's jacket the next morning. Just the jacket. Folded neatly at the edge of the restricted zone. His radio was still clipped to it. Turned on. Broadcasting. But no one dared listen to what it was saying. Because every time the signal spiked, it used my voice. Mike was never found. Officially, the search ended due to weather conditions. High winds, unsafe terrain, limited visibility. That's what the report says. The original notes don't exist anymore. My statements were edited down to bullet points. Times were rounded. Distances were softened. Anything that didn't fit a familiar explanation was quietly removed. When I asked about it, the supervisor just sighed and told me this wasn't the first time paperwork had to be cleaned up. He didn't meet my eyes when he said it. They gave Mike a memorial plaque near the trailhead. His name carved into metal. No date of death. Just the year. People leave flowers there sometimes. Hikers. Families. They don't stay long. I still work search and rescue. I took 2 weeks off after the incident, but when I came back, my badge still worked. My locker was untouched. My schedule was already filled in. The job didn't pause just because the forest took someone. They paired me with different partners after that. Good ones. Careful ones. I never told them everything. There are things you don't share unless you want to see the look in someone's eyes change. The map is still in my pack. The same paper map. Folded. Creased. The black outline hasn't moved. The red ink warning hasn't faded. I trace it with my thumb sometimes without realizing I'm doing it, like touching a scar through clothing. I still avoid the restricted zone. Not because I'm afraid of it. Because I know it remembers me. The rules work. I've learned that much. I don't call names after sunset. I don't follow thermal hits where they don't belong. If the forest goes quiet, I leave no matter what. And I never turn around when footsteps walk with mine. Life outside the park feels thinner now. Noisy. Crowded. At night, when everything finally goes still, I notice how sound behaves differently in town. How echoes return when you expect them to. How silence doesn't feel intentional. But sometimes, just before dawn, I wake up with the same pressure behind my eyes I felt out there. Like something is checking distance. Measuring. Last night, I stayed late at the station finishing a routine report. The buildings settled around me, wood creaking, heater ticking, familiar and dull. My radio sat on the desk, turned low. I wasn't expecting any calls. At 2:14 a.m. it crackled anyway. Just for a second. Static. Then my voice came through. Clear, calm. Practiced. Ethan, it said. You left something behind. I didn't answer. I didn't reach for the volume. I just sat there, staring at the radio while the hairs on my arms lifted one by one. The transmission ended on its own. No follow-up. No static. Just quiet. I filled out the incident log the way I've learned to. Time noted. No anomalies observed. Radio interference likely. Then I locked the station and walked to my truck without looking back at the tree line. The forest stayed silent. That's how I know it wasn't finished. Because the park doesn't scream when it's angry. It screams when it's hungry. And it only whispers when it's patient.